everybody, and welcome to the first ever live episode of the TF1 show. And I'm very excited to welcome a friend, I guess, somebody that's also very interested in the world of motor cars and motorsport in particular, and also incidentally Barrie Ferreira. So we share the last name. I think. Oh, there we go. All right. Sorry, slight technical difficulty there with the sound, but we can continue straight ahead. So what we're going to discuss today, and it's something that we've mentioned or spoken about on Twitter already, I think, over the past week, and there's been a lot of back and forth over, what the right decision should be, whether it makes sense or not. But the question that we are posing ourselves today is whether Mercedes should sign Sebastian Vettel to their 2021 Formula One team. Now, I'm going to argue for why they shouldn't, and Barry's going to argue for why they should. So I think, Barry, why don't we start with you, and you can maybe give us a couple of arguments for why you think Vettel should be at the team next year.
Yes, well, thank you first of all for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate it, and we've actually been wanting to do it for a really long time, so it's actually cool that we're actually being able to do it now. If you don't know, I am a very big Sebastian Vettel fan. I have been ever since I basically not joined the sport, but became interested in Formula One. And basically, I think he should join Mercedes, right? Even if it's just for 1 year. I'm not saying that he has to be there for like 5 years. I think it would just be really awesome to have a Sebastian Vettel, Lewis Hamilton battle, and so we can properly see who is the best. So first of all, I think we need to see who Sebastian Vettel is up against. So potentially the other person who may be joining Mercedes, if Valtteri Bottas actually doesn't stay at Mercedes, is George Russell, right? George Russell has been in the sport for a grand total of 1 year, right? Sebastian Vettel has been there since 2008. So obviously Sebastian Vettel has got a lot more experience on his side. Second of all, Sebastian Vettel is a 4-time world champion. Besides Lewis Hamilton, he is the next most successful driver on the grid. And I think that, having a 6-time world champion and a 4-time world champion right next to each other is going to be absolutely brilliant, not only for Mercedes, but for F1 in general.
All right, is that what you're saying? So my argument for why I shouldn't be at Mercedes next year is quite simple. I think Mercedes would just throw millions and millions and millions of dollars into the water if they had to sign Sebastian Vettel, even if it is for 1 year. I think, at the end of the day, Mercedes is still a business. It's still a company with shareholders. It still needs to be a successful team, and they have invested a lot of money both into Valtteri Bottas and into George Russell, who has been their junior since 2017. So to me, it would just firstly be a slap in the face to both Bottas and Russell. That's actually contributed a lot to the team ever since they were part of it. And I think, Bottas has been the very, very loyal, I guess, I don't want to call him a servant, but the loyal workhorse, rear gunner, wingman for Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton the last 4 years. So I do feel it would be a slightly, a bit of a low blow maybe if Mercedes do fire Valtteri Bottas and sign Sebastian Vettel. And I think even more than Bottas, maybe make a case for George Russell to join the team next year. And I know you say that he's been experienced, he's been in the sport for the sum total of 1 year, and that might be true. However, I do think we've seen with both Red Bull and Ferrari, their experiments with their young stars have actually worked out quite well, with Verstappen and Charles Leclerc being pushed into the big teams. I mean, Leclerc was also in Formula One for the grand total of 1 year before he was moved into Ferrari. Verstappen did 1.5 years at Toro Rosso, and then he was in the Red Bull. So, and I think those experiments have worked out brilliantly for them, and I would be surprised if Mercedes don't want to replicate exactly that with somebody like George Russell, who I think is probably, and he hasn't had the opportunity to show it really yet, but I think out of the crop of rookies that's full. And I think also, keeping that in mind, for Mercedes, they need a continuity plan here because,
Yeah.
Hamilton isn't going to stay there forever, right? And if
Yeah.
Hamilton leaves, who are they going to be left with? They don't want Valtteri Bottas to be the experienced one, because I think then if you have to put Bottas up against an experienced Verstappen and an experienced Leclerc, I think I know who I'm going to back, in terms of
Yeah.
coming out on top. So it just makes sense to me for Russell to be in that seat next year, given everything else that's going on, and given Mercedes having to plan for next year. And then the next part, I would say, of my argument would be, I think 5 years ago, if we had this discussion, I would have said, yes, let's put Vettel in that car. Vettel versus Hamilton,
Yeah.
two of the most successful drivers on the grid, head to head. Let's see what happens. But I don't know. I just think Vettel, I don't know what he's been doing in the last couple of years, but he doesn't seem to be the driver he was all those years ago in Red Bull, where, I guess the team was slightly built around him, I would argue, where in Ferrari, or at Ferrari, it was sort of built around him, I guess, from about 2015 to 2017, maybe 2018 as well. And then last year, we saw what happened when, the team removed their support, as it were, from him and tried to, level the playing field a bit with who they prioritize during the race.
But
And I think, yeah.
Yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about as well. Because if you take 2013 was the last time he won his world championship, right? Then obviously we went into the new whole turbo hybrid V6 era, and then he sort of struggled to keep up. Next year he joined Ferrari, and for the next, since up to now, he hasn't really gelled well with the car, and various factors I think lead to that. First of all, I think at Red Bull he could actually race the car. He knew he had a good car underneath him. He knew he could.
And
You know, he
I think
didn't
the
have
car
to push
itself also, it suited his driving style, right? So I think he liked the whole blown diffuser situation where he had a lot of rear stability. I think the way that the car behaved during those blown diffuser days, I think it helped him in the way that he could extract
Yeah.
the maximum from the car as well.
And also, I think a very big contributing factor is that Vettel at various occasions at many races had to manage the team as well as manage his driving. If you take Lewis Hamilton, he can go out. He doesn't have to worry about the decisions his team makes because he knows every decision they make is ultimately going to give him, if not the win, the highest possible position that he gets. Sebastian Vettel does not have the confidence that his team will definitely get the right call because we've seen this time and time again. Ferrari's strategies are woeful at the best of times. So I think Vettel has gotten a bit. I don't know if it's tired or just he feels that he can't. The team around him cannot provide the I don't know how to put it, the structure to give him a race winning car.
I'd agree with that. I think, but then my question would be, will Mercedes be able to provide him with that? Because I don't think he will have, the team built around him like he had at Red Bull. I think he can hope, what he can hope for at most, if they did do it, is a 50-50 split with, Hamilton. How long has he been in the team? He's been with Mercedes as long as, Vettel was still at Red Bull. I think that was when Hamilton's first year at Mercedes was. So I think it's going to be very difficult for Vettel to make that team work for him, especially, as you say, over 1 year. It's probably going to take him at least a year to get embedded in the team and to get to know everybody and to understand how the team works and understand the way they do things. And then he has to go up against Hamilton, who we've seen, had its number, especially over the last 3 years. Hamilton was just head and shoulders better than what Vettel was. So I don't know. For me, it's difficult to see how it would work for Vettel and how it would work for Mercedes, because I just think that if you had to go head to head with Mercedes and with Hamilton at Mercedes, I think it's gonna cause unnecessary stress within the team, and that's something that the team wouldn't want, because obviously Vettel's gonna try and assert not his dominance, but make himself known. And Hamilton we know how Hamilton and Rosberg went. And I think Rosberg is probably the less controversial figure between himself and Vettel. So yeah, I just don't. Know. From if you think about Mercedes and Toto Wolff's perspective, I don't get how it makes sense for them to sign Sebastian Vettel, even though it may be romantic. It's a romantic thought of having
Yeah,
Hamilton and Vettel, a team with 10 world championships between the two drivers. Sounds ridiculous if you think about it like that.
yeah,
But and actually, I'd be surprised and I guess happy to be proven wrong from the perspective where it would be very interesting to see if Vettel did drive for Mercedes. However, I think I would be just as interested to see Russell in that Mercedes next to
yeah.
Hamilton.
Very
I
true.
would I would very much want to. I really want to see how good Russell is compared
Mm.
to his peers. So compared to Leclerc and Verstappen, and even somebody like Norris. So yeah, I don't know. I
Mm.
mean, happy for you to try and convince me otherwise.
Well, let's bring into the equation the possibility that Mercedes might be mm, leaving the sport, although they have come out a few days ago and said that it's really not going to happen. But let's just, for argument's sake, say they are actually going to leave the sport. If not in the next year, say in the next 5 to 10 years, wouldn't it be better to have two proper successful drivers in the team to try and extend their winning streak of their current six constructors titles and six consecutive drivers titles to have the two best drivers on the grid to try and extend that winning streak as it is.
I think yes. If we went under with the assumption that Mercedes is going to leave the sport at the end of next year, then it would be a victory lap of sorts. All
Mm,
of their drivers with all of their world championships, and Mercedes with all of their world championships, just flexing their muscles and trying to win the last championship, I guess, before the new regulations kick in. I mean, I can see that happening. I think that sounds plausible. But if Mercedes is going to be in the sport for the next 5, 6, 7 years, then Vettel makes no sense. Then I think they run the risk of losing Russell, because I don't think Russell's going to be happy just sitting at the back of that Williams forever and ever and wait for
yeah,
Mercedes to give him the seat. I think there are many other teams that's probably going to jump to sign him if the Mercedes doesn't, the Mercedes drive doesn't work out for Russell. I also think, if Mercedes isn't ready for Russell yet, what's wrong with Bottas and what they already have? Why would they change
yeah,
the recipe that's won them 6 titles already, or 5 titles? 6 titles. They've won
yeah,
6 titles.
yeah. I
So
don't know. I think I'm just tired that Bottas is literally just there to support Lewis Hamilton. I know
yeah,
he's had some strokes of brilliance. I just find it extremely boring that he's literally just there to for the team. And I know F1 is essentially a team sport, even though you have two individual drivers. But I do think Bottas is not pushing Hamilton.
no.
If anybody, who not that anybody is actually pushing Hamilton, I feel like he's the one that's actually pushing himself. But I feel like it would be more entertaining if there was a bit of friction in the team. Like everybody, and I spoke to someone else the other day. Everybody's too like buddy buddy with each other. There's no
Everyone's too
proper rivalry
nice.
between the one at the moment.
But the thing is, the team, they don't want that, right? I think that's the sort of annoying thing about Formula One at the moment is teams are actively avoiding conflict within the team because they know it hasn't worked out. Like, I think if we had to think back, where has a team with more than one world championship done really well because of their drivers, not despite their drivers? I can
Mm,
think maybe Hamilton and Button when they drove for McLaren. I think that was decent. Don't think
yeah,
they came to blows too many times, but also they weren't fighting for like a championship, or not
yeah.
like at the front of the championship fight. I mean, Hamilton and Alonso was a disaster. Hamilton and Rosberg was a disaster.
Prost
Um,
and Senna.
Prost and Senna was a disaster. So
Bro, you saw disasters in Formula One. Everything's so predictable.
I know, but the really funny thing is I saw yesterday that Hakkinen said, he thinks this is the year that he believes that this is the year that Bottas is going to win the world championship. And I was thinking to myself, I thought, I mean, it's all well and good to say that, right? But and I would sort of say, okay, I believe that if Bottas was like finished close to Hamilton last year, in any close to him in any of the championships that they've driven
Mm.
together.
But he
But it's
hasn't.
not like it was. It wasn't like it was like 20 points or 30 points difference between the two of them. It was like 70,
Yeah.
80, 90 points between them
Yeah.
at the end of the year. And like, how much would Bottas have to improve for him to like beat Hamilton? Because I think qualifying is quite good. Like, I think his qualifying is decent, similar I think to how Rosberg was when he was trying with Hamilton. But like in the races, Bottas is not at Hamilton's level yet. Like, I mean, at Silverstone, Hamilton was able to do a whole race with one less pit stop essentially, and Bottas wasn't even able to conceive a universe where doing a one-stop strategy during the British Grand Prix last year was possible. So yeah, I mean Hakkinen, he tried, right? I think it's good to hype up your fellow countrymen, but I don't think it's going to happen. And I think that's why Mercedes like Bottas, because I think he's good enough to, bring in the points for them. And on his day, he wins a race, or he has a good, he gets the pole and he wins the race. But, Hamilton is still going to be their champion. And what I think they want to do is they want to get Russell in the car with Hamilton next year, so that maybe the first year Russell can learn a bit from Lewis, like what Leclerc did with Vettel last year. And if Hamilton is tired and he's 30, how much now? 36 or 36 next year, then he can say, okay, cool, deuces, it was fun, and then he can go, and then Mercedes is Russell to help them go up against Leclerc and against Verstappen. However, Vettel isn't as old as Hamilton. I think he's 2 years younger, 3 years younger. Can't remember.
Yeah. I don't know. I think, look, the chances are very much against Vettel that he actually will be joining. So even though I really want him to join up, there's a side of me that knows it's probably not going to happen. But I just think, when was the last time that a F1 season was like truly exciting, and where, like 2018 was probably the closest we've come to a championship battle. And I think even if it isn't coming from another team, I still think that for the sport, it's going to be massively pointed. And think about the drive to survive, how that season would turn out if it was Hamilton and Vettel.
Yeah. Although, I just wish Vettel was a bit more like engaging towards, I don't know, the general public, because I agree it would be fascinating to watch Drive to Survive with Vettel and Hamilton. But I would just if Vettel just had a Twitter account, like I would love to follow Sebastian Vettel on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's like Raikkonen with his Instagram account. I mean, he has the best Instagram probably out of everybody that I've seen. Just to be able to see, what he gets up to, I think would be fascinating to watch. And I think maybe we can maybe conclude on that point and say that I think it would be really cool from a fan's perspective, from a practical Mercedes making the best choice for them perspective. Probably unlikely, but
and also remember that apparently Mercedes is actually pushing for Vettel, because obviously German driver and a German F1 team would be ideal. So that's some thought as well. Does Toto Wolff have enough say to persuade the shareholders to not get a German driver?
I mean, Barry, you must cling to that hope. You must hope.
I will.
You can hope. You can hope for the two of us, because I have lost hope a long time ago. But okay, let's maybe, if you want, I think we can maybe ask this question to our listeners that's going to be tuning in when I release this podcast eventually, and maybe get their views as well about whether they think Vettel should be driving for Mercedes next year, whether you are a romantic or whether you are a pragmatist. You can maybe come and tell us, and you can actually join the discussion that we have on Twitter every now and again. You can follow Barry. And Barry, what's your Twitter handle if you maybe want to tell the ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, it's at Barrie Ferreira.
Okay, and you can follow me, and I'm obviously at TF1 Show. You can follow the podcast there, and let's have a lively discussion over Twitter if you guys are keen. And I guess something we can now look forward to is the fact that the Austrian Grand Prix sounds like it is going to happen in
Yes.
about a month's time. And I'm very sad about it because I actually had tickets to go.
Oh no.
And yeah, and I have to get a refund because crowds aren't allowed.
Yeah,
So
damn.
it's
That would be
bittersweet.
epic.
I'm not gonna lie, but such is life.
Indeed.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. So thank you so much, Barry, for joining. I think it for today. I think I'll have you on soon, definitely again to discuss more of the interesting, topics that we've got going around in the F1 world. Yeah, it's been a pleasure discussing with you, debating with you, and I hope you enjoy the last few days of level 4 lockdown here in South Africa. I think hopefully next, from tomorrow things are a bit better and a bit brighter.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you everybody for listening. Please do subscribe to my channel. You can follow me on Twitter, as I mentioned, or you can follow me on Instagram as well. Go give Barry a follow. He has very interesting content too. And I'll chat to you guys all next week.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you very much for having